Go ahead.
Okay, I'm calling to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Marine Water Board of Directors for October 5th, 2021. The first item of business is to call the roll.
Director Bregman,
Here.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Muted.
Here.
Director Russell,
Here, welcome back, Larry.
and President Kohler.
I'm here. Are we adopting the agenda now or are we doing that? Okay, then I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move approval to adopt the agenda.
Second,
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on adopting the agenda?
There are none.
I'm looking for a roll call vote.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, so we are now looking for whether there's any public items on simply, oh wait. No, we already did that on the closed.
the-
Okay, sorry.
For
Do we have
the
any
closed
public
session,
comment on the closed session item.
There are none.
Okay, then we are convening to closed session.
see you there.
Back to order the regular. Okay, I am calling back to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Marine Water Board of Directors for October 5th, 2021. We are reconvening after closed session with no reportable items. That brings us to public comment on any items that are not on the agenda. Terry, do we have any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Rick Adler, please. Mr. Adler,
Yes, I thank you very much. I wanted to urge the board and the staff to let go of the old paradigm that this is just a temporary drought, and that if we do enough maintenance and conservation, we can get through it till the good old rains return. But I think that it's been proven that this is not the case, that this is the new normal. We'll occasionally have wet years, just enough to bring complacency that we have returned to the old times. But in effect, the western half of the US is drying out and the eastern half is drowning, and that's the new normal. And so we have to find new sources of water. And what I would suggest is that we investigate and begin to prepare to install solar electric powered desalination by heating the water to steam, condensing the steam for pure water until all the water is out and only salt is left. That salt is a marketable commodity that can be used as rock salt on roads for snowstorms, and it will all be sold and taken away. So we eliminate the problem of putting toxic effluent back into the bay with the traditional, expensive, highly technical reverse osmosis process. So let go of that one. And also another source of water is stainless steel fog catching fences. Several miles of 50-foot lengths of fog catching fences on the ridges of southern Marin will produce a lot of pure water. I have a bunch of other ideas, but I only got 3 minutes. So I can't even go into them in any detail, but I urge you to get out of the paradigm and look anew, get out of the thinking box that we've been in and go on to the new times. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you for the comment. And as you know, we can't engage on items that are not on the agenda, but the drought is on the agenda. So we can speak to that when we get to that item. I am going to ask staff, Mr. Adler has been quite a consistent and I think very constructive member of the public commenting on these issues. And I'm going to ask staff to please reach out. I know it is frustrating to be limited to 3 minutes. And I think he's very thoughtful. The one thing I will say is believe I speak for every member of the board when I say nobody has the slightest interest in any old paradigms. I think we are very much forging ahead with new paradigms. We may have different views about what that looks like, and that's fine. We can have that conversation. But I do at least want to assure the speaker that there is not a single person working in any capacity at the district that has any illusions about whether or not we're in a new paradigm. So if I could make that request to staff in light of Mr. Adler's continued engagement on these issues so that he's not limited to his 3 minutes of this time. Do we have any other comments that are not on the agenda, on items that are not under the agenda?
Yes, President Kohler, we have 3 speakers, James Krajewski, Ed Jameson, and Larry Minneke in that order. Mr. Krajewski.
Hi, thank you. Some time ago, I requested some basic information from the Water District about water use by various categories, such as businesses, residents, landscaping, creek or stream releases, golf courses, pools, etc. What I eventually got in response was a list of documents with numerous attachments that came literally a few hundred pages of information rather than just some concise data on water use. For a minute, imagine a publicly traded corporation going bankrupt and interested parties not being able to access a basic spreadsheet explaining what the corporation's money is being used for. Here, we have an analogous situation of a public entity running out of water, and the entity doesn't put together a simple spreadsheet of a few pages of information on its website that details what water is being used for. We've seen at board meetings the repeated questions over water use for golf courses, new hookups, swimming pool usage, tier 3 and 4 usage, etc. It's difficult to move to the next phase of public discussion and acceptance of board decisions when the supporting data are often only discussed in broad terms at meetings, and the data can't be found in a simple chart on the website. My impression from reading the IJ letters to the editor is that the directors in the Water District are coming under increasing scrutiny. Decisions are being questioned, and the website may not provide readily available explanations or data that support the decisions. Water District customers deserve better information on the website. We shouldn't have to rely on IJ reporters to ferret out explanations and keep us updated. But unfortunately, that seems to be the way things are evolving. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krajewski.
Yes?
Your turn to speak, sir.
Pardon?
Terry, he just did speak. We're on to the next speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Jemison. I'm sorry. Ed, Mr. Jameson. Hello, sir. Okay, wait. Oh, there
Do you
you
hear
go.
me? Do you hear me
I
now?
hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'd like to offer brief comments on 3 items. First, I'd like to suggest that some critical feedback info be added to the bi-monthly bills. Below the gallons per day for this year and last, there's ample room on the bill to add the following wording: increase / minus sign decrease, then the percentage calculated from the above 2 numbers, followed by drought goal : minus 40%. This will provide valuable feedback to water users as to whether they're helping solve the present crisis. Second, I'd like to comment on the board meeting's proposal to ban drip irrigation December through May in favor of hand watering with a can or a hose, I assume that means. There's no way that using a can or a hose would use less water than drip irrigation by a mile. And banning drip for 6 months would kill much or even most of Marin's landscaping. This idea is a non-starter and needs to be discarded. And finally, in the last board meeting, Ms. Kaler's demand that the emergency pipeline bond measure must include a slush fund for long-term conservation projects that have heretofore been funded out of operating funds must be disregarded by the board. The pipeline bond measure needs to be clean, and the bonds need to be issued timely to get on with the procurement of materials, some of which will almost certainly be unavailable or only with multi-month delays, and some possibly requiring that workarounds be engineered. Hiding a bunch of long-term conservation funding in the pipeline bond issue is totally inappropriate and could potentially delay timely issuance of these critical pipeline bonds. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Minikes? Hello, sir?
Larry, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, because I did unmute. I'm sorry. So good evening all. And I'll try and keep my comments brief. And this is toward communications. And I've been almost on a one-person crusade here on the IJ responding to the letters. What I've been finding very helpful is to take your own slides and within my comments, post your slides. And what comes from that is no negativity and a fair amount of positivity actually from people. And what I might suggest is, I know where to find tonight's slides. I just looked at them. It'd be really valuable because what people are complaining about is that they're not hearing about this. They don't know what you're doing. And you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing out there. They're complaining that nothing's getting to them. So if I may suggest on social media, put links to your slides, or actually put some of the slides up there, like tonight's Intra-Tie slides, 10 through 14. It explains it all to people. Then they'll know exactly where you're going, because people feel like they don't know where this is going in generals. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Larry. Do we have any other public comments, Terry?
There are none.
Okay. That brings us to directors and general managers announcements. Ben, do you have any announcements?
I do not, President Kohler, tonight.
Okay. Any directors announcements?
I have none.
None for me.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a no. That brings us to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Do we have any board comment on the consent calendar?
There are none.
I'm gonna abstain on the minutes because I wasn't here, but other than that.
Okay.
So if the secretary would just note an abstention for me on that one item.
Got it.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
There are none.
Okay, then we're looking for a roll call with the caveat proposed by Director Bragman.
Director Bragman,
I with an asterisk.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and Director Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the regular calendar. The first item is an approval item, a resolution to continuing virtual board and committee meetings due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, President Kohler. Actually, I have a quick presentation on this. Terry's going to help me with the slides. So, everybody see? Okay, perfect. As you know, we've been in virtual meetings, so we're here tonight to discuss the continuation of virtual meetings under AB 361 and some issues related to transition into in-person meetings. Next slide. So the pre-COVID Brown Act requirements, just to set the stage from sort of where we were, where we have come and where we are now. So teleconferencing under the pre-COVID Brown Act requirements was allowed. It did require the quorum of the board be located within the district's jurisdiction. Also required the teleconferencing addresses be posted on the agenda. Required posting of the agenda at the teleconferencing locations, and allowance for public participation at the teleconference location there was in person or either at the main venue or at listed teleconference locations. Pre-COVID, most jurisdictions met in person with, I would say, infrequent exceptions that had to comply with these requirements, and virtual COVID act, or it was just very
I think you need to
uncommon
cut
for
your
that to-
video, Molly. You're
Oh,
going in
am
and
I
out.
breaking out? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
Okay, hope hopefully you can hear me better now. So just to stress the last point, virtual public participation is not required under the Brown Act, but may be allowed by the board. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. So then in March of 2020, there was an executive order from the governor's office, which was amended in June of 2021, eliminating the requirements for holding in-person meetings due to COVID and relaxing the teleconferencing posting requirements. That expired on September 30th of this year. However, next slide, please. Assembly Bill 361 was passed as an urgency item and was assigned into law September 16th, and allows the local agencies to continue to hold virtual meetings during a proclaimed state of emergency, which is still in place with the proclamation by the governor's office is still in place, when any of the following also apply. So state and local officials recommend social distancing measures. The body is holding the meeting to determine whether to continue virtual meetings, which is where we are tonight, or the body has already determined that in-person meetings would present risk to health and safety of the attendees. And it also requires the board to reconsider the circumstances of the emergency every 30 days. Next slide. So recently, the County of Marin took up this issue post the adoption of AB 361 on September 22nd. The Director of Health and Human Services issued recommendations for continuing social distancing and use of virtual meetings in a letter to the President of the Board of Supervisors. September 28th, the Board of Supervisors acted to adopt a resolution pursuant to AB 361 that will allow virtual meetings to continue for all county boards and commissions. Some considerations for in-person meetings now, of course, looking at local case rates is important. The graph to the right, you can see COVID cases from in the area from June 16th through October 1st, and you can see that they are on decline. However, they're still not as low as they were during the summer. Hopefully, they'll continue to decline, but it is difficult to predict. We also need to consider, if we're going to go to in-person meetings, that we'd have to continue to follow CalOSHA requirements for employees, of course, and we would want to adhere to the CDC and Department of Health guidelines. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the risk factors for COVID-19 exposure. Unmasked indoor spaces, not enough social distancing or ventilation. Next slide. Some practices to consider for in-person meetings, and this is all contributed by our safety director who's here tonight, but also probably not a surprise to anyone to hold meetings in a space where social distancing is can happen, with lots of air, requiring face coverings the entire time, opening doors and windows, wiping down commonly used items, etc. Next slide. Other considerations are potentially partitions, HEPA air filters, and where ventilation isn't possible. You've seen some of these other measures used: confirmation of vaccination or testing status or screening for COVID symptoms, and requesting participants to provide contact information for contact tracing. So those are all issues that would need to be considered for in-person meetings. Next slide. So for continuation of virtual meetings at this time, if the board determines that this is something they want to allow and is appropriate, we would continue to use Zoom for all of the directors, staff, and public participation in compliance with AB 361. It would require reconsideration of appropriateness of continuing virtual meetings every 30 days. So the next board meeting of November 2nd, that would be something that would need to happen until such time as either the emergency proclamation is lifted and we really don't have information about when that could happen, or January 2024, which is just the sunset provision that's included in AB 361. There are agencies currently who have already determined they'll be continuing with the virtual meetings. They're listed here for your interest. Next slide. So a couple of other points that we thought we'd mention tonight, just to keep in mind in consideration for transition to in-person meetings. So, hopefully COVID cases will continue to decline, and the board will want to consider options for returning to in-person meetings. It will happen, I think, at some point. And examples of in-person meetings that are occurring now are listed here. The City of Mill Valley is not using any virtual participation. Contra Costa Water District is allowing the public to participate virtually. Next slide. Also hybrid meetings, which are kind of a cross between in-person and virtual meetings. I've actually seen where some of the board members are virtual and some are in person. This helps limit the number of people who are inside the facility. And then the staff, members of the staff and public may also participate virtually. This is being done in Santa Rosa and San Jose. So for tonight, based on the information provided and also the Health and Human Services Department's encouragement to continue social distancing in virtual meetings, the staff is recommending that the board adopt the proposed resolution to allow continued virtual board meetings and committee meetings pursuant to AB 361 at this time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Molly, for that extremely thorough presentation. I want to turn first to the board and see if there's any comments on the presentation and see if there's a motion before I turn to public comment.
I have a question. And I missed it. Those flipped through there pretty quickly. It looked like there were at least two local city councils, I think, having in-person meetings only. Did I see that? Is that correct?
Yes, I believe there's at least, well, it was Mill Valley and then the Contra Costa Water District.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Has anybody talked to either of those agencies to get a feel for what they're thinking, why they were comfortable? My own belief is that in-person meetings are a lot better. They're more effective and they work better. But at the same time, we are nevertheless faced with a reality here that makes that difficult to impossible. And I'd be interested to know what the thinking is, let's say in Mill Valley, for example.
Director Gibson, I spoke with the clerk at Mill Valley, and they wanted to pursue in person just because many of them wanted that feeling of meeting with the public and reestablishing connection with their community. So that was one of the reasons, or the main reasons. It is a little, I did get some feedback on that it is a little difficult sometimes to social distance because their facility is small. Whereas the Contra Costa Water District, I spoke with the clerk there, the board secretary, and she, again, also many wanted to have that community feel, meeting with the public again. There wasn't, they have the space, they have the accommodations to be able to have the in-person meeting and to meet the social distancing requirements.
Right, I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Any other board comments on this item? And if not, do I have, sorry. Go ahead.
I agree with Jack's thinking, until we're out of this whole variant process, I think it's pretty unfair to expose staff and council members to meeting in person again. I mean, it's a totally different world we're in right now, and it's not the same. But I think we need to be cautious. So I agree with the recommendation and would move approval.
Okay,
Okay, I'm taking that as a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further board comment on this item? Terry, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are none. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, actually, one just raised, Mr. Rick Adler.
Okay.
Mr. Adler?
Yes, I want to speak in favor of continuing the virtual meetings because I think that this pandemic is going to end, not going to end, it's going to turn into an endemic with various variants coming in from abroad or even locally. And we're going to continue to need to protect ourselves from it. And we don't, even the triple vaccine people can catch a case of the COVID. And we don't know what the long-term results of a mild case is. And so I think we need to continue the virtual. Also, from my opinion, the virtual meetings are better because I can hear people better. I can see the slides and presentations better, and they're more ordered and they go quicker. They're time saving. And also, if the drought continues, there's going to be more and more people wanting to attend these meetings. And they're not all going to be polite. We're going to start seeing the phenomenon that you see in school board meetings. And we like to think that the people in Marin are a little more civilized than others, but there is a small minority here that will come and disrupt the meetings. They will be very angry about wearing face masks or having to be vaccinated and having themselves cut off after 3 minutes. And for those reasons of safety, I think we should continue the board meetings. You might consider that there'll be more people wanting to have 3 minutes, so the meetings will go longer. So maybe you do one meeting each week with fewer items on the agenda, and that might be easier on everybody to have shorter meetings with fewer items more frequently with the virtual meetings. I thank you very much.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, if there's no further board comments, let's have a roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. That brings us to item 6. This is an approval item, a resolution authorizing the general manager to execute a budget augmentation to reimburse the county for the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard Corridor Rehab project.
Good evening, directors. Crystal Yasmin, Director of Engineering. Alex Anaya is going to present this item.
Hi, good evening, directors. I'm Alex Nye, Engineering Manager of the Design Section. This evening, I'm here to request a budget augmentation for the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard Corridor Rehabilitation Project. On May 15, 2020, the board authorized the general manager to execute a reimbursement agreement with the County of Marin for the installation of 8,500 feet of pipeline with the County Sir Francis Drake Corridor Rehabilitation Project. The construction reimbursement agreement was for $3,297,762 with a contingency amount of $165,000 for a total construction cost of up to $3,462,762. Early on during construction excavation work, it was discovered that there was lead in the soil along the project corridor. Neither the district nor the county had anticipated this condition, which resulted in an additional cost to both the county and the district with respect to the disposal of the contaminated soil.
Wow.
The contaminated soil had to be off-hauled and properly disposed of at the Potrero Hills landfill at Bearfield.
Wow.
The district's pipeline trench excavation work generated over 4,500 tons or approximately 2,300 cubic yards of material. And the district's portion of the soil disposal cost totaled $258,776.55. As a result of this change condition, along with other contract change orders during construction, the total construction budget had a shortfall of $219,526. So as a result of the budget shortfall, district staff is requesting approval of the resolution authorizing the general manager to execute a budget augmentation and any necessary amendments for the reimbursement agreement with the county in the amount of $219,526 for the Sir Francis Drake Corridor Rehabilitation Project. I'll take any questions at this time.
I have a question, Alex.
Sure.
Was the contamination from an identifiable source, or is it a natural condition?
It's
the cars,
thought that
Jack.
it's correct.
I'm
Director
sorry,
Russell.
say that again?
It's the cars from leaded fuel.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, we worked on a sandbox near USC, and they had 3,000 parts per million of lead in it from the fallout from the Harbor Freeway,
I
Wow.
see.
from when they got leaded gasoline. That's why they got rid of leaded gasoline.
Yeah, where exactly was this construction being done? Sir Francis Drake, I heard, but where?
Yeah, it's between Highway 101 and Ross Terrace. That was a corridor that was
Okay.
along the entire corridor.
Which side of the road was it on?
Our pipeline was on the northern side, or I guess the eastbound lane. So that it was for at least for our component of the work, it was restrained to that section. But the county encountered on both sides because they had earthwork on, sidewalk improvements and road improvements on either side. So it was really spread out through the entire corridor.
Wow.
Do you know if they looked at the median when they did the median?
I'm sure they did, because every component of soil that was excavated needed to be specially handled for soil contamination.
What was the highest level of lead that you found?
For the samples, I got that right here.
Just ballpark.
87 milligrams per kilogram.
Oh, that's pretty low, relatively
Yeah,
speaking. I
it's
mean,
still
it's above the standard, but
correct.
compared to what I've seen, like I said, I've seen 3,000.
Correct. Yeah, it still required special handling though because of that elevated
Sure.
contamination level.
Wow.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, Terry, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have Valerie Erickson on this. Ms. Erickson? Ms. Erickson?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about all the other problems, but what I'm concerned with is our water shortage and desalination. And when I listened to your Zoom in August, one of your members said desalination hasn't been taken off the table. My question is, what's been done to examine this? The engineers that are in our area, have they been called? What's the evaluation, location, cost, time? Just wondering.
Ms. Erickson, we're going to have an item on this, but right now we're approving a motion on something very different. So I'm going to have to
Okay.
put your comments aside until we get to that. We need to stick with this agendized item for now, I'm afraid. But you're welcome to bring that comment back when we get to the drought update, if that's okay. Do we have any comments on this item from the public?
There are none.
Okay, then we need a roll call vote.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
President Kohler.
Aye. All right, we are now turning to item 7, which is an information item, and this is the drought update.
Good evening, Board of Directors. I'm going to pull up my screen. Lucy Croy. We're going to be giving an update on the drought, starting first with a summary of the water year, which just closed out at the end of September. Then we'll move into an update on drought activities and outreach in the community, looking ahead also at some upcoming items. And then we'll finish off with a quick update on conservation efforts, with updates on the September metrics, as well as a little bit of an overview of the recent survey of customers. So starting first with an update or a summary really of our water year. The water year runs from the beginning of October through September, and this really represents the hydrologic year. So across the state, the water year 2021, which just finished up, it was really an extreme year for the entire state of California, both in precipitation and rainfall. And looking across the state through the records, this was the second driest water year since 1895. And the low amount of rainfall seemed to focus a bit more on Northern California, as we expected. And this water year 21 is building off of water year 2020, which was also very dry and hot as well. And that, when they look back through the records across the state, was the 5th driest. So we're looking at 2 very dry years back to back, as we know well by now. And the water year 2021 is more severe than the water year in 76, 77. So just putting that in perspective at this point, and understanding where we sit in this drought compared to the drought of 77. So looking at our own records, we see similar trends. So we have over 143 years of records, and this last water year was the 2nd driest, with just 20.4 inches of rain. And you can see that the only other time that we had a little bit less rain over that same kind of 12-month period was 1924. So quite an extreme year that we've seen. And really the impact that it's had is watching our reservoirs drop rather rapidly, with lower runoff than we would have hoped for and expected, and unable to replenish our reservoirs as they usually do, shown here with the average line up above in the darker. As of today, we are just below 27,000 acre feet of total reservoir storage, which represents 34% of our total capacity. So this, moving into October, once again, is still staying very historic for us. This has been updated and showing that even just through the last 40 years, when we've had the current reservoir system that we have, that this is the lowest storage for this time of year. So in the upcoming months, what can we expect? NOAA is saying that there's a forecast of about 70 to 80% chance of a weak to moderate La Nina, so transitioning from neutral where it is right now to a La Nina in the coming months. And what that means is really more usually dry conditions in Southern California and Southern Nevada. And when we look towards more Northern California, it's really equal chances wet or dry. So in summary, we don't really know. We don't really know what the next few months will look like, and we will keep a close eye, but this map is showing one of the most updated maps coming out of NOAA. So taking those thoughts into perspective on how it can look at impacting our reservoirs, still forecasting ahead reservoir storage through the end of next year, on the bottom being 25% if we were to receive somewhat normal runoff, 25% of average, and then on the higher end average. But having these back-to-back consecutive years of dry, we know that there's a lower rate of efficiency of runoff. So some of these may be a little bit different depending on how much rainfall we get. What we do know is really the impact that conservation savings can have on our reservoir storage, just showing that in any of these scenarios, kind of that bump up that we can have through achieving significant conservation over the coming months. And then an update on our water use over the last couple of weeks. We're still seeing water use somewhat start to decline, which isn't completely unexpected moving into October, but it did drop a little bit more. So a 29% weekly reduction was last week's, is what was achieved. And since May, we're seeing, so since just about when the water shortage emergency was declared and mandatory restrictions were put in place, we see a total cumulative water savings of 23%, and that's compared to our 3-year baseline as of May 1st. And moving into October, you'll see that this baseline water use does drop. So, you know, we expect that historically the water use does drop as the irrigation kind of winds down, but we'll see, you know, we hope to see water use continue to decline a little bit more. So at this point, I'm going to hand off now to Emma Detweiler, our acting communications and manager.
Thank you, Lucy. Good evening, everyone. So the first project that I'd like to share with you is our effort to work with our community partners to really help us share these drought and conservation messages that we've been bringing out to the public. This is just two examples of some different organizations within our community, some trusted voices within the community that are helping us to get the word out. You have Mill Valley Schools here and Marin County Park. We've been reaching out to schools, to libraries, other government agencies, cities and towns to help us share this conservation and drought messaging. So in addition to these posts you see here, we've also had the City of Larkspur and the Belvedere Tiburon Library help us share this information. And we have a number of different messages that will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks, and we'll continue to utilize these partnerships and just help spread this information throughout our community. Next slide, please. So on our own social media channels and our website and our own outreach efforts, we're working to get into a regular cadence of providing information to our customers. On Fridays, we are now providing a Drought Facts Friday feature. So we're taking some of the questions that we're hearing most often from the public, questions we're receiving and comments on social media through email or phone calls to the district. We're really trying to address more in real time topics that are top of mind for our customers. So that's on Friday. And then on every Monday, you can find our reservoir storage update. So we've been posting these videos that show really what the reservoirs look like to give our customers an idea of the drought conditions. As Lucy mentioned, we're at 34%. So our goal with this effort is to have some regularly scheduled content that our customers can come to expect and receive from us. Next slide. And we recently published our September e-news. This is an email newsletter that currently goes to about 25,000 email addresses. And I just wanted to note the open rate for our last edition was 40%. And the industry average being for other government agencies or municipalities is about a 25% open rate. So that tells us that this is information that is relevant to our customers and that is being well received. Some of the topics in this edition included information about the water use limits and penalties, upcoming webinars, promotion for our cash for grass rebate, and also information about how to pick up one of our free water saving kits. I just want to note quickly that this will not be the only source of information about the new water use limits and penalties. We have an infographic in the works. We also have some district-wide mailers going out. So this was just in response to the board action to adopt the water use limits and penalties, and we wanted to get that information out to our customers as quickly as possible. Next slide, please.
Actually, Emma, before you go to the next slide, can you just go back for a second? Did you say another mailer is going out?
So there will be a mailer on the water use limits and penalties specifically. So this was an email newsletter, and I just wanted to note that this would not be the only time that our customers will hear from us on that topic.
That's great.
It was the cover story, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's great. We have heard from a few folks, and I think it came up today in one of the comments that at least some people feel that they're not hearing where the water goes. Where's the water going in the district? And we've talked about this quite a lot. So I'm a little concerned that at least some people are still feeling they're not getting at that information. So I don't want to derail your presentation, but if before that mailer goes out, if we can have a conversation about including that, because I do think that's one of our biggest problems since people don't get their bills until 2 months later, most of them. So I think in light of the fact that we've kind of plateaued a little in terms of conservation, it may be useful to use the next the next direct mail to let people know where water is being used, so they have the most the most up-to-date information that they can have about where they can cut back.
Sure.
And I think also that overview about where the district's water is going is very important, just having context as opposed to just save water. I don't think that's as constructive as letting people know where the water use really is going and where we are most recommending that the opportunities for long-term reuse and efficiency lie.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next slide here. Thank you. So looking ahead, next Monday, we will have our first of 2 community conversations on drought. These will be recorded webinars. We've had 125 people pre-register, so we're really excited about the response from the community and hope to have great attendance. Since they'll be recorded, they'll be available on our website if anyone is unable to make it, but we're really looking forward to getting that started. The second one will be on the 21st. And I'm working with Carrie's group and doing some brainstorming internally on how to expand our Cash for Grass rebate outreach to really increase participation in that program and really see if we can't get those applications up. So we're working hard on that. This is one of our promoted ads here on the bottom. So we're trying some new imagery, we're trying some new places, and we're really putting a lot of effort there. So that's what we'll be working on the next couple of weeks. And with that, I will pass it to Carrie, who is our water efficiency manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. All right, good evening, Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. So we're gonna start with some customer polling. As you all have been told many prior meetings, that we are working on a high water user survey. That survey is complete. I wanted to just provide a couple of key takeaways. I think that they're action items that we can start incorporating in the near term without digging into the entire survey. Those 2 points are really that these customers are motivated to reduce their outdoor water use. And that one aspect that would really motivate them is understanding the benefits to their neighborhood and their community, specifically around fire safety, fish and wildlife habitats. And so I think that working with our communications team, we can kind of start to incorporate some of that into our outreach materials. The other is that that the method for communication that they find most useful is through their water bill and word of mouth. So those bill inserts that we utilize are definitely being seen by these high water using customers, which is great. We weren't sure if they were even the folks paying their bills or opening the bills, and so that's good to know. Those are just 2 kind of key takeaways in the short term, but we will have a full presentation at the Water Efficiency Committee meeting, Communications and Water Efficiency Committee meeting on November 17th. And we'll go through not only the high water user survey, but also the focus group findings, which is currently underway. They're doing recruiting for the focus group as we speak. So that's happening. Another turf program in an informal survey that staff has done just over the last 10 days or so. We wanted to see if there were any opportunities to improve the program, getting input from our customers who have already participated, whether they completed a project or perhaps dropped out of the program. And so we wanted to reach out to them and get some feedback. What we learned was that like many folks right now, locating materials has been a challenge. So finding enough cardboard and enough pipe fitting or plumbing fittings to cap the irrigation heads and all the staff to do the work, et cetera, has been a challenge for our customers. So I think there's an opportunity there. Another challenge that was brought up is that they're not sure what to plant and when to plant. And so that's another piece that we can really start addressing up front, recognizing that we intend to provide resources and notify them and really continue to work with them once the drought's over and we can have adequate water supply for establishing new plant material. One good takeaway was even folks who may not have continued through the program all said that they would definitely refer to the program to a friend. And so that's a good word of mouth kind of sharing, which I think we can continue to build on. Next slide. So looking a little bit closer at our turf programs, we've seen a couple of fairly significant success stories that I wanted to share. We had 2 HOAs go through the program just over the last 2 weeks. As if you've been involved in an HOA, there's a process there, right? You have to have the project developed and approved by the board. And after 4 months or so of this program being available, we're finally starting to see them start to pick up the program and participate. One was fairly significant at over 6,000 square feet, and it looks like they may be interested in doing more, which is great. We also are continuing to refine the program internally, meaning how we're tracking the applications and how we're processing them, just to try and increase the efficiencies within this program, because it is it's significant, right? We want to make sure that we're doing it in an appropriate way and tracking specifically so that we can realistically talk about our goals, which goes next slide, Lucy. And so you'll note here's our program participation for September. And if we look at just the turf programs, I do want to call out that the numbers for the last 4 months have been adjusted. And what we had been doing is when we would track folks going into the program, we'd get a square footage of when they were pre-approved. And then when they completed the project, their square footage would then be transferred to the month of completion. And so there was no double counting, but the numbers were shifting. And so we've wanted to clean that up so that we don't have, June, July, and August numbers changing. And so we've kind of refined that. And so now we'll start to see, more of a consistent tracking, I would say. It's interesting though, when we change the methodology, so the totals are the same, it's just really what month they fell in. They're really quite consistent, which is interesting to me because we are still seeing a lower level of applications come into the program, but I also think we're also seeing some larger sites come in, right? And so there's that's happening as well. And so we will continue to work, as Emma noted, to promote this program as our key program to achieve significant water savings, and see what else we can do to continue to push that. But I was pleased to see that September was an increase. All of our other programs continue to be fairly consistent, and we will continue to track them and promote them as well as options for achieving water savings. Next slide. Finally, next steps. Of course, continue to refine and promote outreach and conservation. I will note that there was a comment from one of our on one of the prior items about the desal. And so we will have a separate presentation on emergency drought projects, which is the next item. And so they can either hold those or ask them now, either way. And then of course we continue to monitor and report the status to the board. So with that, we'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, this is not an approval. Oops. This is not an approval item. This is an information item. So I want to turn first to board comments and then we'll open it to public comments. And if you could keep your comments to this item, as Carrie indicated, we're going to have another item on the, some of the other emergency items that actions that we're looking to. This is specifically on, the drought and our communications and conservation efforts. So board comments. Larry. I think you're muted. You are muted.
For Emma, you had Friday questions, or there were question Friday, whatever. Is there a page where all that is captured that we can refer people to?
Sure, we have an FAQ document on our website, either on the conserve page or the water rules page. It's a PDF, about 4 or 5 pages of frequently asked questions.
I'm looking at it right now, so it's
okay.
And I'm not seeing an FAQ switch. Anyway, if maybe you could send me a link to the page just so I could use it. I'd appreciate it because I'm not seeing it right now, and I think that would be very helpful. Because we do keep getting similar questions over and over again. So it's just nice to have sort of a repository of answers and research. So thank you.
And I to that, I had the same thought, Larry, and I do think the FAQs are a good place for that. And I know you've been refining them over time. I do think we need to make it easier to find them. We might want to talk, offline about making it easier to find them from the homepage. It does take a few clicks to find it. I've definitely had people ask me questions, and when I refer them to the FAQs, they get frustrated trying to find it. So we may really want to do what we can to make that available to people through, a number of different routes. I know you've been working on that. I'm sorry we keep raising it, but we do keep hearing from people that they're having trouble finding it. Other board questions, thoughts, comments? So the one thing that really strikes me is that you guys are doing a great job. I know you are flat out working very hard. It occurs to me that we really need to be thinking about increasing our incentives because the targets are fairly, I don't think we're where we need to be yet with the targets, and we're not meeting them. which I don't put down to any lack of effort on the part of the team. But I do think we need to look at the strategy and, ask ourselves, it looks like the early adopters have adopted. I mean, Carrie, I'd be interested in knowing what you think, but I think we need to be revising the strategy in light of Lucy's report that, we're in an El Nino year. We may be looking at further dry conditions. I think we've done an incredible job, an extraordinary job really in getting to this 30% goal in the limited time that we've been working on this. But I think we need to up the goal and we need to up our game. So I'm interested in knowing your thoughts about what we need to be doing to increase either the incentives, make the penalties a little more rigorous, and add additional capacity to move us forward. Because I think what we're not talking about anymore is save water, shower with a friend, turn off the water when you brush your teeth. That's all fine. We really need to be making these longer term, bigger investments in reuse and longer term efficiency. As a colleague of mine is always saying, it's not a matter of using less, it's a matter of wasting less. And it seems to me the programs that we've put in place are good, but they are not being utilized to the degree that we need to get people to a long-term, more sustainable level of water consumption. So I'd like your thoughts on that. And I don't think we can wait till November. I think we need to be moving very quickly to increasing our game here in light of the reports that we have about how this drought is likely continuing in the future.
Well, as we move into fall and winter, irrigation should be stopping anyways, right? Even if it's dry, it's cooler. And so, I mean, I think that when we look at the monthly participation, we're getting, it's fairly consistent, 94 to 98,000 each month. I don't know if we have seen all the early adopters necessarily yet. I think folks are kind of doing a wait and see, to be perfectly honest. I think they're, I don't know if we offer them more money if they're going to actually jump on it, but that's just my opinion. I mean, really. But I think that
you're the expert, so I think your opinion counts for quite a lot. I'm just saying we have a goal and we've kind of stalled. So I think that being the case, we need to be tweaking our strategy or enhancing it. I think tweaking, we may be past tweaking at this point, but given where we are and given that we're still hovering right around 100 gallons of water per person per day, or do you feel differently? Do you feel that we're just where we need to be in terms of efficiency? Because I think this community can do better. I just think we need to get ourselves there.
I think we can I think we have an opportunity to do more, but I think that also part of it is I think there's an opportunity to do more, and I think that we as staff can take that into consideration and look at what other opportunities we might be able to lean on. But we want to recognize that irrigation season is ending, right? And so how low will demands drop during the winter will be very will help inform us on where we should be focusing, where we should continue to focus.
I really think we need to revisit your proposal, your concept about artificial grass. I've looked through the documents that were provided, and I think those are interesting issues, but I don't think they have anything to do with water reduction. And I think that's probably the key to this thing moving forward. I don't particularly want to have a desert landscape in my front yard, but I think the artificial grass gives the look that used to be there.
I just want to say thank you, Carrie. I know that you and many of the staff have kind of been working nonstop, on this issue of how do we take our conservation to higher levels and to get the message out. And I want to sort of commend what's been done and sort of echo what Director Kohler is saying, which is, we can't take the foot off the gas pedal, so to speak. What more can we do? Because we aren't where we want to be. We've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go still with our water year. So I really look forward to hearing what additional ideas you've got. So thank you.
Could I just make a real quick point? There was an article, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago that I sent to Emma and Ben that compared all the conservation efforts in the Bay Area. And as much work as we have to do and as many miles as we have to go, we are far and away doing the best of any district in our area. And, you know, it was not included in an article in our local paper, which was pretty disappointing to me. So I just want to remind everybody, like President Kohler did, we have come a long way in a very short amount of time. And we do have miles to go before we rest. But, you know, we should also recognize that we have made progress.
Yeah.
And, you know, the last mile is always the toughest. So, you know, I do want to commend everybody for their efforts. And I know everybody's been working overtime. So I just think that point should be made on the record that this district is doing better than the other districts in our area. So the point should be made.
I think that's an excellent point, Larry. I think that the citizens have done a great job of conserving. We do need to get more, but you know, I don't know if you saw the statewide, but the Southern California groups like LA Water and Power actually increased their GPCD a little bit, like 1 gallon. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was shocking to me that in the drought like this, that they're going up, and they see the efforts that are going on in Lake Mead and places like that. They know, I mean, they're lowering the intake in Lake Mead at an $800 million cost to be able to get water out from a lower elevation than was ever envisioned. So it's I think your point is well taken, and we need to pat ourselves and the citizens on the back, but just encourage them to do more.
Yeah.
There's I mean, we have these reports periodically, and it is evident to me that you guys are doing what you can do and doing a good job. I applaud you for that. But we also have a lot of citizen volunteers out there who are really, they're not just conserving water. I mean, they're promoting it. They're sending the message out. They're talking to other people. So we're not in it alone. I mean, there's a lot of people, there is a community spirit that I think is tied into this, that in my judgment is working. And I agree with Larry, we definitely have miles to go before we're finished, but we're not alone in the effort here. No.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the questions that's facing us is with reduction of consumption coming up in the winter months, you know, maybe shifting our focus a little bit to more the internal domestic conservation, which, you know, it may not add up to as many gallons per person, but that's where our focus is going to have to be is inside. Some of those changes, you know, are going to be a tougher sell, a tougher thing for people to do. But, you know, the community spirit that you mentioned, Jack, it's a big part of this. It's a big part, instead of, you know, pointing fingers and casting aspersions and blame, you know, people really have to embrace the challenge. Everybody, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page about that. And I appreciate the point that we're ahead of the curve in terms of the other water districts. We're also, but that's, you know, that's who we are. That's where we want to be. But I do think that there's opportunities for us to be leading and communicating, you know, even more than we have so far. I mean, I think the efforts to date, you know, as I said earlier, are excellent. I'm a little concerned about the plateau. And, you know, I wonder if we're going to see that drop off in irrigation that we usually do in the fall. That's usually partly due to there being rain, which we haven't seen yet very much. Anyway, we'll see. But I do want us to be continuing to think about how we can, you know, do more to support the community, how we can up that investment and make it clear that this is not the short term. We are making investments, and I use that word with a lot of intentionality. You know, this isn't just conservation. This is investing in our long-term climate resilience, because this is the new normal, as somebody said earlier, and I believe we've all embraced that as a district. I am interested also, my last set of questions is about the high water use survey. And I'm just wondering, was that tier 2 through 4 or just 3 and 4? Who were the folks in that survey?
It was all tier 3 and 4 users.
Okay, and can you give us a sense
How
of
many?
I'm sorry?
How many?
I mean,
How many
Gosh,
users?
yeah, so I
Just
want to say the
ballpark.
survey was a couple hundred of them.
well, it's a pretty good
Okay.
sample size.
Yeah. And overall, there aren't that, I mean, I think you said at one point, there's only 900 folks, or 900 accounts in tier 4, and probably in tier 3, another few thousand. It's not a lot of users, but that's definitely kind of the low hanging fruit. That's where we've got some opportunities. That's the reason for the survey focusing there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Just and
And-
recognizing that how are we going to motivate them to make significant changes when, like I said, they may not even be the folks who see the bill, right? They may not even ever see their water bill. And there were some interesting findings, which we'll have the company who did the FM3 who did the survey actually give the presentation and kind of walk you through all the cross tabs and kind of how they slice and dice the data to be useful for us. And they're working on that.
Do you know how many pay their bills online?
I
Percentage?
don't.
Because, you know, you don't get the attachment on the online bill. So it's lost to those folks.
Right.
That's a
Right.
good point.
Okay. I want to be sure to keep us a bit on track. It's already after 8:30. Do we have public comments on this item? Terry?
There are 2, Roger Roberts and James Krajewski. Mr. Roberts?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
My question was pretty much the same question that Board Member Kohler raised. And that is the target was 400,000, for instance. I guess that's square feet per month for grass, for example. And you're only getting a quarter of that. And so the question becomes, why is that so? Why aren't more people adopting it? Is it because nobody has actually made a direct call on them? I mean, there's in marketing, an idea like that, it may pay to send people out to those targeted people and speak with them directly instead of just doing it remotely by mail or some sort of that manner. I'm not sure how you actually market this.
Hey, Emma, do you or Carrie want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different tactics that we're taking, and we had this survey. We also did an informal survey on Nextdoor just to get some feedback, immediate feedback from our customers. We're working closely with Carrie to see if we can replicate any spikes in applications, whether that's tied to the e-news, whether it's tied to a postcard going out. We're really assessing what's reaching these people and what's inspiring them to action. I think Carrie and I both agree that it doesn't seem to be so much a lack of awareness of the program. Maybe there's ways to refine the application process to make it easier to go through. Maybe the timeline that we're requiring for the project to be completed. And I think we're assessing all different aspects of how to increase participation and working hard to boost those numbers.
Next speaker is Mr. James Krajewski.
Hi, thank you. In the interest of community spirit, I just wanted to raise an issue on the water bills. It compares our usage, our personal usage, to an area average. I had no idea what the area average was, and I did speak to somebody at the water district and now have an idea of what the average area average is. But it seems to me it may be misleading about how good we personally are doing in our water use, because my water use, or my lack of water use, looks great compared to the area average. But I think the area average may overestimate what most people are using. PG&E has a and I don't often use them as a positive comparison, but they have something that says compared your energy use compared to similar homes. And so while my water use may look very good in terms of community spirit, I don't know how it is compared to similar homes. And so I would urge that you look into this particular aspect of what we're comparing water use in homes in Corte Madera to what, so that we have an accurate picture of what our personal water use is. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one more public comment. Rick Adler. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I wanted to commend the board and the staff on the wonderful job you're doing with the conservation. It's very remarkable that you made such great progress. But I also want to say that there are limits to what can be achieved through conservation because of the human nature. A third of the people, I'm guessing, are those that come to these meetings and do everything they can to save water. But another bunch of people are, they're too young, or they're too old, or they're too drunk, or they're too busy, or they're too something else, and it just doesn't enter their reality. And then there's another big chunk of people that don't actually live in the county, the workforce that comes in from other places that have very little interest in conserving marine water. And there's another big chunk of people that are just selfish and self-centered. It's just their human nature. They could never conceive of saving water for other people. And then there's the rich entitled. There's a bunch of those. So that's why I keep suggesting we find new sources of water. Is this the time when I can suggest a conservation method for the district to use?
Of course.
I would suggest that we float several thousand 6-foot wide inflatable rubber rafts on the lakes to prevent the evaporation. They could be manufactured and produced relatively easily and floated out on the lakes to prevent the evaporation, and then reused, deflated and reused again the next time. And also we put down strips of ground cover that they use in agriculture to prevent the evaporation from mud around the edge of the lakes, because that mud drying out in the sun just wicks the water out from under the lakes. And, the lakes are not just what you see, but what's under the ground that forces out pressure. So by reducing the amount of evaporation of the mud, you'll also save water from evaporating out of the lakes. And that could be removed as the lakes lower in elevation. Those strips could be put next to the lakes into the muddy part, picked up and put down again. It's hard to explain these things in just 3 minutes, but anyway, that's two conservation methods that they could use that save a lot of water. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker is Miss Valerie Erickson, please. Go ahead, Miss Erickson.
Thank you very much. Now, Cynthia, you brought up my favorite point, investing in the long term. And I really think we need to look into desalination. I've got names of engineering companies that are local. Let's find out time, price, location, how long it'll take. I'm worried about the civilization. Some people in Mill Valley on next door, they admit that they're watering their lawns so their children can play there. The brown lawns returned back. I was here in 1977. Now, also, Carrie, you brought up a good point. How do you motivate the people in Tier 4? You double their costs. You bring them around every single time. I'm sorry, it's old fashioned, but it works. But I just want to know, what are we doing to look into desalination? I'm concerned about civilization. My friends call me the water police. I am literally squeezing water out of a stone. This weekend, my water uses, I love the Ion Water app. I look at it 3 times a day. And this weekend, I had days that I used like 4 gallons. And we can't deal with the sociological issues about who's selfish and who isn't. That's a whole other issue. We've got to concentrate on civilization. And most people, number one, they care about safety and belongingness. And if we remind them, if you don't have water, your green garden isn't going to be the priority. My landscaping is going to hell, but I have a priority. It's not just for me. It's for everybody else. I think we need to get East Bay Mud involved. Let's get north of us, south of us, Palo Alto. In Hillsborough, they're using 75% of their water uses for their landscaping. Persima, whatever that area is, 249 gallons a day. Palo Alto, Menlo Park, they're 90 and 67 gallons, and East Palo Alto is 38 gallons. So if we get everybody involved in this, everybody will chip in, and let's participate. It's the civilization. And Cynthia, I so agree with you. Investing in the long term. And yes, Jack, I believe in promoting this with all my friends. I'm saying, you guys, this isn't a joke. One of my friends said, "Oh, just because you're on this water crusade," I said, "This isn't just a fad, like some new diet or, starvation stuff. This is our future. Do you care about your children? Then I can ring a gong. Okay, maybe we don't care about ourselves, but what about our children? What's this world, what's this planet going to be like?" That's just my opinion, but let's look into desal, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. O'Mara, last speaker. Go ahead, Ms. O'Mara.
Hi, I've just been watching everything and kind of thinking about the messaging and kind of what might be missing. And there's 2 elements that are missing. One is, I've talked about one of them before, is the 40% goal is not in your message. And I think I brought it up in the communications meeting, and it was discussed. And I think there was a lot of kind of agreement that 40% should be out there, because if everyone's shooting for 40%, then we have a better chance of accomplishing the goal. It still isn't out there. Not sure if you don't want it out there, but just to flag that, I think it's a valuable element in hitting targets and goals, is actually seeing what your goal is. And I think it was Jack that had the idea of putting like fundraising for schools. You have your target and how far you are up on Sir Francis Drake or something like that. The other thing that really, I think, may be missing is kind of talking about, this is the fall, we're going into the fall, kind of the end of the season. 2 months is not the end of the season. That's kind of a long time when you're in an extreme drought. And then also pre-planning and prepping everybody to take action before the winter hits, for everyone to focus on the insides of buildings. That's not just residents, but it's also businesses, and it's, it's offices, it's apartment complexes. And just, looking at this, at what the information that's going out, there's a lot of communication of, yes, we're in a drought, but there's no communication about some easy things to do and what percentage will result from those. And just quickly, I just did a quick calculation here. Going from, it's fall, here's your fall message, going from fall is here, the sun and the heat is less, it's reducing. So should you and your water. So what you're watering every 3 days, set your timer for every 4 days. Your plants will be happy. That's a 25% savings right there. Let people know, just change 1 day, you've saved 25%. You have your timer on 10 minutes, go down to 9. Guess what? You just saved 10%. That, have 5 quick, easy things for people to do in their house. That just takes a few minutes of effort. And it will, you'll easily
add on some percents of your water savings. Another thing is, prepping for the winter, put out, how much percent aerators save, how much percent efficient shower heads save. Give people the ce1.org website so that they can get really tier 3 efficient washers, not just, Energy Star tier 1s, that kind of things. It's a very, give them 5 steps and let them know what percent that step will save. It's just, that's one thing that I don't see in some of the promotions. That's it.
Thank you.
Great.
There
Those
no
are
others.
very, I'm sorry, did you say there are more comments?
There are no more.
Okay, so I want to move quickly on to item 8 because we've had a lot of questions about desal tonight, and that's, I think, where we're going to be talking about the emergency drought projects. This is again an information item. It is not an approval item.
Good evening, folks. Paul Cellier, Operations Director. That was interesting comments at the end of the last presentation there. I'll try to keep this as peppy as I can. I know we're in the midsection of the long innings here, so we'll try to pep this up. Emergency drought projects tonight. We're going to go through just a quick summary of projects, and we've added a couple to the long list that we've seen already in the past. Noting that, of course, conservation remains our sort of primary focus because it's something that we can do right now. We are partnering, of course, with Sonoma, and as one of the commenters tonight has asked repeatedly for some information on desalination, hopefully we'll be able to hit that. And of course, we'll get into the status to date of the emergency intertie project and our next steps. So quickly then, with our water supply project summary, we've had a couple comments in the past on fog harvesting. And while it's a very neat technology and very friendly in terms of the environment at a small scale, it's just not suitable for large scale. You're looking at maybe a gallon per square meter of mesh per day, and we can sort of do the math from there. Similarly, solar desalination, if you were to try to do a solar farm for desal, you'd be looking maybe at 600 acres of panels. So it's just, land is just not available for us to do that. Excavating reservoirs, similarly, we've sort of been through that, over 400,000 truckloads just to get a 10,000 acre foot. And again, water by truck, barge, or rail is a definite possibility, but we are considering this as sort of our option of last resort. Groundwater storage and recovery really is a longer term opportunity. It does look like there may be some opportunity with Sonoma, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But again, it's not a near-term solution for our drought. In terms of recycled water, of course, we don't talk about it too much, but we do have a recycled water distribution system serving 325 customers and a little over 1 million gallons per day. We've added to that in the form of the residential fill station, which has become quite popular. And we've seen some statistics on that in the past. And we are looking at expanding the purple pipe by designing and looking at alternatives to design the pipe route to the southern area so we can expand that service. In terms of Sonoma Water, we're continuing to collaborate on all opportunities, and I'll have a little bit more to say about that. Desalination, really, it's a sort of rapid deployment, small in terms of capacity. It is limited, and the timing for desalination that we're faced with would dictate a temporary solution. The emergency intertie project proceeds. We're pursuing the project design. The feasibility of the project has been established. And as I mentioned at the top, we continue our priority with conservation and focus there. Narrowing down then to sort of our 4, if you like, main options with conservation, collaboration with Sonoma, the intertie project, and desalination, just thinking in terms of some pros and cons. In terms of our conservation, we know, of course, that the savings that we get today, we get to keep. They're long-term. And we've talked about sustainability, but there are many benefits, right? Every gallon of water that we don't use is a gallon we don't have to treat or pump.
So many pros associated with conservation. And really the only con that we can come up with in a sense is that there's just an uncertainty level. And how much can we get and in what time frame? How much conservation can we achieve? Our collaboration with Sonoma is on sort of two main areas in addition to our normal sort of imported water from Sonoma. Winter water is this referring to excess flow in the Russian River as a result of precipitation. So of course it does depend on precipitation. And thus in dry years, there's going to be very limited capacity for any winter water opportunities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And groundwater pumping that Sonoma had stopped because the wells needed some rehabilitation. They're working on those wells and they've got a plan to bring those back into service over the course of the next year, with one of the wells coming online in the next couple of weeks, I think. The allocation of that groundwater pumping for MMWD is uncertain because, of course, there are a number of partners who may also be interested in that. And there are some positives associated with both of those. Of course, there's minimal infrastructure needed. The infrastructure basically exists in terms of the pipeline. And long-term, it is possible that it could be available as a long-term option for us. And it builds on our relationship with Sonoma. The emergency intertie project, it really allows us to tap into multiple sources. It's a true diversification and provides access to regional projects that we would not ordinarily have access to. And of course, in times other than drought, where a facility like that could be extremely useful. Thinking wildfire may affect our watershed or Sonoma's. And of course, earthquake. The cons really relate to the high capital cost, and there is still dependency on others. We will have partnerships and relationships that we need to maintain. And in desalination, it's security of the water supply. The ocean will always be there, and it is a proven technology used all over the world. Again, it's a higher capital cost than even the Intertie project. If it were a permanent feature, but the timing that we're faced with in response to the drought dictates that it's a temporary facility. So it is a high capital cost for a temporary facility, and it's limited in capacity. So just a little bit more on our partnering with Sonoma, who have been doing some great work doing analysis on this winter water concept, that we're so grateful for their help and appreciative of the support that they're showing for us. And as I mentioned, when we have a precipitation event that increases flow in the river beyond stream flow requirements, we can tap that water and they can bring that water into their system. And we can respond very quickly. So think of a big rainstorm event that comes in, would increase the flow, and with some communication with Sonoma, we can adjust our treatment plans to accommodate more Sonoma water. The Sonoma analysis does indicate that, in a dry year, there's just not going to be, as you might imagine, that much extra flow in the river. But we do continue to work with them and have really good partnership with Sonoma, and we'll continue that collaboration. I mentioned they're restoring the groundwater wells for a total capacity, I think, ultimately between 5 and 6 million gallons. But the allocation for MMWD is unknown. It really depends on to what extent the other partners need that water as well. These both winter water and the groundwater kind of build and lead us into this longer term aquifer storage and recovery, which may be a good fit because in average and wet years, there is extra water in the river. And maybe we can take that water and store it in the aquifer. At this point, the capacity of the aquifer, and again, the allocation of that water for MMWD is also unknown at this time, but it's something that we're exploring as part of the Sonoma and the partnership are working on a resiliency study, and this will be a part of that. Onto our desalination that we've been looking into, which essentially, again, this is a rapid deployment or emergency temporary desalination system. Is engineered prefabricated. Really just that's the only equipment that we would be able to get to meet our schedule of next July.
We have, of course, piloted desalination in the past to show that it is possible to produce safe drinking water from the bay. The equipment that's available today has a capacity between 3.6 to 5.4 MGD, depending on the supplier. And of course, it's subject to equipment availability. And we do know that there is interest from other parties in this equipment. And so if we want to continue to preserve desal as an option, it likely does require some sort of financial commitment from us. And there'll be maybe more to come on that in the future. Oops, sorry. Guess I'm ready to move on before I'm ready to move on. So our progress to date on desalination, we've essentially been working this project almost in parallel with the emergency intertie in terms of looking at permitting activities and what would be required. We've already met with the Regional Water Quality Control Board to understand what they would need from us and what we'll need to get ready for them. Similarly, the Division of Drinking Water, we've introduced them to the project. And we're scheduled later this week and the following week to meet with other key agencies and stakeholders such as Army Corps, Fish and Game, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and a number of other alphabets that you might imagine would be interested in the desalination activities. The team is working on a detailed schedule and roadmap for the project delivery, and we hope to have that in the next week or two. At this point, desalination equipment still remains available to us on the market. The costs have been presented previously and conceptually around $35 million for this 3.6 MGD system. Of course, if we were going to increase that capacity to 5.4, these costs would increase up to closer to $40 million. Moving to the emergency intertie project, this is the overall alignment starting on the right here in Richmond, in the Point Richmond area, and moving across the bridge to our Pelican Way site, where you see we're proposing to install a couple of tanks and a pump station, and then some in-system distribution improvements that are necessary to accommodate that volume of water to this area of our distribution system. We've been working over the past couple of weeks with East Bay Mud, and tonight we'll be looking at requesting an authorization from the board to approve the MOU with East Bay Mud. And this is really going to help us sort of finalize our approach before we get into developing a detailed wheeling agreement, which will identify the costs and operations required to deliver water to Marin. We've also been working on an agreement with Contra Costa Water District to allow the storage and possible exchange of transfer water in Los Vaqueros. And we'll be bringing that authorization to the October 19th board meeting. Negotiations with transfer water suppliers, we're thinking maybe those will be coming to the board in the next 4 to 6 weeks. These may also be packaged with our key partners. For example, Contra Costa, if they choose to act on our behalf in the transfer market, and similarly East Bay Mud. So the transfer water supplier agreements may not be individual, but as part of the key agency agreements. In terms of project engineering, the technical feasibility across the bridge has been established and agreed to by Caltrans, and we're pursuing the contract for the amendment for the final design tonight. The selected alignment is under the upper deck of the Bay Bridge, excuse me, of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. And there were two main feasible pathways, one under the upper deck, the other on the bike path or multi-use path. And the selected alignment being up under the upper deck, really because that alignment allows current and all future uses of the bridge, as well as Caltrans operations with the bridge, but without any interference from the pipeline. We are already have quotations out for the pre-purchase of materials, and those will be brought to the board for authorization on October 19th. So in terms of the pre-purchase for materials, we're
we're estimating the total cost of that between 18 and 25 million. It's going to be about 50 to 55,000 feet of pipe that we're buying. And there are 2 pump stations. These are big mobile pump stations, one in Richmond, one at our Pelican Way site, and 2 bolted steel tanks that would be installed at our Pelican Way site as well. It does look at this, we've done a preliminary analysis looking at our distribution system pipe that's 24 inches in size. And we've identified a couple areas, the Southern Marin line, which is about 20,000 feet of pipe. It's the main transmission line that serves Southern Marin. And it was installed in the 50s, and there is a significant leak history. And so we would be able to repurpose any pipe that might get stranded should the board decide not to pursue the pipeline project across the bridge, the intertie. So quite a bit of that pipe could be reused in our system. And there are other areas that we are looking at. There's an old Kent Lake to Alpine pipeline that's probably another couple miles of pipe, but again, that's more of a resiliency project that we would need to evaluate to decide whether that was something we wanted to do. There are other projects as well that we're looking at where we know that there are pipelines that we would like to see upsized. So they may be a 21-inch or a 22-inch pipeline that may have significant leak history or significant age that need also to be replaced. So in all, we think at least 50% of the pipe would be able to be reused at this point. In addition, we've included in the specification language for the manufacturer or supplier of the pipe to assist the district in reselling or reusing those materials should we decide to cancel the order. Of course, the pump stations, we would probably want to keep those. They can be used for emergency response at any number of locations, treatment plants, or large pump stations that maybe we need to rehab or respond to an emergency situation. Similarly, with the bolted steel tanks, they can be deployed as replacements or retained for emergency response use. The pipeline estimate remains between $60 and $90 million, and you've seen the term for the bonds of 30 years and the approximate rate increase that would be required of 2.7 at the 60 and just over 4% at the 90. Our key milestones then, we've seen August 30th, the amendments for the feasibility work. That feasibility has been established. And tonight, this next item, maybe it's the one after, we'll ask for a full design for the pipe segment that's on the bridge. And then of course we have the MOU with East Bay Mud tonight as well. And on October 19th, we'll be looking for the authorization for the agreement with Contra Costa Water District and also to authorize the pre-purchase of material, which we expect, as I say, between 18 and 25 million. December 2nd is the bond sale. And we're expecting a January, should the board decide to pursue the project, of course, award of construction in January of 2022. Wow. Our next steps then are, continue to develop the emergency intertie project and to work further on the rapid deployment for desalination to ensure both of these remain viable options. We'll be bringing regular updates to the board along the way. And of course, conservation continues at front and center for us as the action that we're pursuing actively right now. And that concludes the presentation on the emergency intertie project tonight.
Thanks, Paul. As usual, you've done an incredible job, very thorough, very helpful. I want to start with board comments and then we'll go to public comments on this item.
I have a couple questions for Paul. On the containerized desal, is the cost of that leasing or purchasing?
The cost that was shown on the slides tonight is leasing, but we do have costs for purchase as well.
And how do they compare with lease costs?
They're very, very similar, very, very similar.
you know, it really depends how long you lease it for too, right? If, you know, if you keep paying 500,000 a month for 2 years versus 12 months, obviously the lease cost is going to be way more expensive than purchase. So there's a sort of a break-even number of months there. And it's just, if you're going to lease for 12 months, you're better off buying generally. To purchase is about 2.5 million more than to lease, just in rough numbers.
Yeah, so it kind of evens out fairly quickly, it seems like.
Right.
So the other question I have was, staff provided us with a copy of East Bay Mud's PowerPoint from a recent meeting where it indicated that the intertie would be able to provide 8 million gallons a day. Is that still the estimated capacity of that pipeline?
The pipeline can take a capacity up to about 13.5 million, which is what our peak demand, you know, peak flow we were designing to is. The East Bay Mud 8 million represents their current limitations for us in the area that we're connecting. So it's just one of their distribution system limitations at the moment. But they believe that you know, the future capacity in that area can be improved to what our design standards are.
And what would be the cost of making those improvements, and what would they entail?
So initially, the improvements are some short connectors of pipe to improve the pressure for certain customers in that area of Richmond. And I don't have the cost for that yet. The other projects are more East Bay Mud system improvements that I think they're undertaking anyway, was the understanding that I had. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a last question on the condition of the bridge itself. I think Caltrans has indicated that there's some areas of the bridge that need improvement in order to meet AASHTO standards.
Right. Yeah. So I think I know where you're headed, Director Bragman. So yeah, the in the scope of work for the WSP contract, which we have in a couple items from now, did talk about the AASHTO limitations for the bridge. And this is in relation to using 3 lanes for the traffic. That was actually an issue that they discovered with the bridge before the pipeline was even conceived. So they're actually already undertaking those strengthening requirements right now. And if you're interested, it's just some gusset plates that need to be added to the truss sections of the bridge. So that work is ongoing. It's already been designed. In fact, the engineers that we're using, WSP, were the engineers who had to model the bridge and design the gusset plates. And we were able to take advantage of their knowledge and existing modeling that they'd done in order to do our feasibility work. So it was really beneficial for us.
And so is Caltrans, have they agreed to put in the gussets on their budget?
Yeah, they're doing it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't want to jump too far ahead on that. So thanks a lot.
Any other board comments on this item? I've got a quick question, Paul. The presentation is great. I'm realizing that it's a little hard to compare apples to apples. So and we can talk, separately about, about what you're calling conservation. I would call that, what seems to be missing from that is on-site reuse and sort of long-term, efficiency updates, investments. But putting that aside, looking at these two augmentation projects, desal and the intertie, you've got some rate and cost information. I understand the preliminary impacts estimates, but you don't really have anything parallel for desal. So for as I'm looking at the fiscal impacts, the preliminary estimates for the intertie, you've got sort of two potential project costs, the term, the debt service, and then the rate increase. You're looking at a 4.16, sorry, rate increase at that higher estimate. Is there some reason you don't have those numbers for the desal project?
Not really. We could easily produce those numbers.
I think we need them. I think there's been confusion about this. I keep hearing, oh, it doesn't cost anything. It's just a tiny little one-time rate increase. It's nonsense. I mean, oh, well, I mean, I guess this is for the temporary desal though.
Right.
Okay, I see.
Right.
Got it. But I do think we need those numbers. I think this is challenging, I think, for the board and for the public if we don't have those, have a similar.
That's a really good comment, I think.
Okay.
We can do that.
Could I go back, add one more question, President Kohler?
No.
Okay, be that way. So as far as the off-ramp, if for some circumstance we don't go forward with the pipeline, we had earlier discussed a restocking fee so that the supplier would actually take back the product. Now it's sort of morphed into a reuse, resale type of mitigation. So I'm wondering, it sounds like the restocking approach has been cast aside.
Yeah, the technical term is poo-pooed, I think. But we did broach it with the supplier, and yeah, they're
not going for it.
They don't do that.
Yeah.
Paul, along those lines, to jump in, would selling it to another district, is it of a common size, and is that done within I mean, I don't know if that's feasible either, but just trying to understand what our fallback options might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we knew of any projects that were coming up, right, we could certainly try to market the pipe in that way. And help the suppliers of pipe in the West are limited, right? There's really only one main manufacturer of pipe. It's Northwest Pipe. They've bought the competition. So if anybody knows of a pipe project that's coming, they're going to be the guys that'll know. Because pipe is not just about the manufacturing, it's about the transportation of the pipe. So if you're in Texas, it's just really hard. You can make it maybe even cheaper, who knows, right? But transporting it here is tough.
Yeah.
What about storage? Do we have storage capacity for that much pipe?
So we did look at Pelican Way. Darren actually had looked at that for us early on when we were looking at staging. And we can accommodate at the Pelican Way site. We know we can accommodate about 5 miles of pipe on site there. We would hope we wouldn't get stuck with 5 miles of pipe, of course.
My garage is pretty full, so.
Right. Just to keep us moving along, the only other question that I have is, and you may have covered this, Paul, I'm sorry, but what I'm not seeing is much in the way of estimates regarding the purchase of water itself. We've had a small number of people, but some people have expressed a lot of skepticism about whether we'll be able to buy water on the spot market. I've heard a very high degree of confidence from staff and others that notwithstanding the severity of the drought statewide, that will be available. I think it would be useful to have you speak to the concern that some have expressed that, this is a fool's errand, that, we're going to, build this whole facility and then we won't be able to buy any water. I think it's fairly obvious that that's not the case, but I'm surprised that hasn't been addressed here.
Yeah, so we're trying to, there's a couple things. As we discuss with suppliers and our key partners, East Bay Mud and Contra Costa, the more we start naming names and talking about transactions before they've occurred, it does cause a little bit of a challenge for some of the suppliers.
Oh,
That
That's
aside,
not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying it's not even
yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is,
it's
I
tough
think
to
we need
talk.
to address that without, I guess what I'm looking for is the middle ground here, Paul. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're all looking for some level of confidence from you that that the scenario that I've described is not one that is likely to occur, that in fact, discussions are happening, that you have some sense of surprise. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah.
I think we're all looking for some reassurance is what I'm saying to you.
I would say, Paul, that we are continuing to negotiate where are finding sellers that are interested, and the discussions are continuing. There is today a level of uncertainty, so we don't have that very high confidence. But what I've said, and I'm committed to, we are not going to bring the construction project to the board until we are able to say that we do have a very high confidence that the water will be delivered. And that's really, there's so much work going involved. And Paul touched on a lot of these discussions are happening in conjunction with other water agencies, because they may be the agent that actually enters into the transfer agreement. So Paul's at, I don't know how many meetings a week or a day, but it's tremendous amounts in all of these parallel negotiations that are going on. And I would say there's 4 parties that we are actively engaged in discussions to buy water from. And the volume we're currently in discussions exceeds our needs by design, because we want to have multiple options in case some don't come through.
Right.
So I think we're reasonably positioned for the time we are in this project, and we're going to have more certainty in the weeks ahead.
Okay. And do you feel comfortable sharing sort of a ballpark range of just the price of water? Because I've heard it wildly fluctuate.
It is all over the place. It's a very active market, and certainly a scarcity, and prices go up. And we are seeing kind of in this market a bit of a, I've called it the COVID toilet paper syndrome. That's my own term. I'm going to trademark it, but so
I'd rather you not compare our water to toilet paper.
Right.
But my point is, as there's a sense of scarcity, there's a bit of everyone is looking to buy water, even those that may not need it in a relative way. And in talking to the state, they are looking at that issue, and we are the target agency. There's many, but there's many that are not, in terms of the criticality of need. So I do expect the state approvals to go through, and perhaps some leveraging going on to ensure we get what we need. The state, I was on a call with them the other day. They're very focused. The communities that need the water get it. So they're talking about a much more active role, as you would expect, than a typical year.
Okay. All right. I'm anxious for us to get to public comment. So I just want to make sure with the board, there's no further comments. Okay. Terry, do we have public comments on this item?
Yeah, we have 5 so far and counting. The first 3, Robert Archer, Dave Campbell, then Laura Ethel, please, in that order. Robert Archer.
I find the presentation devoid of the critical information, as I believe Chairman Kohler was leading us to, and that is a comparative financial analysis of least cost water. When an electric utility company looks for supply from various sources, it compares across those sources, reliability, cost, and that is not shown here. The water company presentation, I had hoped, would compare
what would be the cost per unit of water delivered, not in the impact on the tariff, but specifically on the water delivered, and the options before you. There is a purchase option for desalination. There's a lease option with no explanation of what those costs would be in terms of time period, 24 months lease, 20 years purchase. And on the pipeline option, I see nothing there in terms of even on the engineering cost per delivery of unit, let alone the water issues, supply issues, which are fluctuating. And I absolutely think you should be sharing on confidentiality these comparative analyses with the board. And my final point and question is, what was in the decision to take the expensive pipeline route, hanging it from the bridge, as opposed to laying it down on the bridge, potentially where the bike path is?
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Mr. Campbell?
Can I?
Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back and I'll go back to Mr. Archer in a minute. Mr. Campbell?
This is Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay, Walking and Biking Advocacy Group in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. We fought for decades for walking and biking access on the bridge, and we support your option to study and evaluate the water pipeline underneath the bridge. That's fine. And I want to ask that you minimize any placement of the pipeline on the land side, either east or west land side, that closes the bike access and the walking access to the bridge. And if you need to study another route to do that, please include an alternative route in the analysis so you have a plan B to keep the walking and biking access to and on the bridge open. And then we also ask your staff and anyone else from the water district involved in these conversations to invite the walking and biking coalitions to these conversations. The bike path is part of these conversations, and people who represent people walking and biking have to be a part of these conversations. We are making the same ask of Contra Costa County officials and certainly of regional officials, but this is coming from the water district. And so I think in the name of a fair and full conversation on this subject, your staff need to be directed to invite people who are impacted by these decisions. And in this case, people walking and bicycling. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the comment, and especially given that you're coming from another part of the Bay, I really appreciate your making the effort. Thank you.
Mr. Archer, I apologize. You have a minute left to speak on your comment if you want to finish it up, sir.
The issue remains that there's not a comparative basis for looking at these options on the bridge, under the bridge, buying or leasing, as well as the other options that you're considering. There is no comparative analysis of the financial costs. Where there is a lack of data, utility companies will put in some range of potential costs and then narrow that down as the data becomes more available. So I would ask specifically, will you do that and put together that for the board and post that on the website? And secondly, what was the basis for the pipeline being hanging from under the bridge, the expensive route versus laying it on the top?
Paul, can you very briefly address those questions?
Yeah, I think the first one, of course, we'll do whatever analysis the board needs us to do in order to be able to make a decision whether you wish to pursue the project or the desalination project. Regarding the selection of under the upper deck, that choice was driven largely by compatibility with current and future uses of the lane that's proposed. While the lane currently is a bike lane, I'm given to understand that there is a potential once the bike lane is right now a pilot, by the way. It's a 4-year pilot. And once that
pilot period is over, there'll be an evaluation as to what the best use of that lane will be. And it could be a weekend bike lane and, you know, a traffic lane during rush hour type of thing, hence the movable barrier. And so there's operational equipment that Caltrans needs to get in that lane and up and down the bridge to move the barrier, and also to inspect the underside of the bridge. Placing the pipeline in that path would, you know, render it almost impossible for Caltrans to do their inspections and to move the movable barrier. So these are not simple or trivial decisions. They're not taken lightly. And we believe that under the upper deck is the best solution for us to get the project built in the time frame that we have. And it enjoys support from the major stakeholders, as you've just heard tonight.
Yeah. The next three speakers, Laura Epple, Ed Jamison, and Rick Adler, please, in that order. Go ahead, Ms. Epple.
Thank you. I see that Paul is a very busy guy, and I'm sure that the pressure to come up with these solutions is enormous right now. But I think to a large extent, this is a failure of long time planning that should have been done. And it looks like he's doing the best he can, but there's a very good option that I don't see being evaluated at all here. And that is purification of wastewater. Now, I know you're doing the purple pipe arrangement with Central Marin, but there's another type of wastewater purification, and you only need to look as close as the Santa Clara Water District to see what they're doing. And that's a long-term solution, not a short-term or medium-term solution like the things you're working on now. It's much less expensive than desalination, and I think it's a viable thing for this county. And I would hope that when you've dealt with some of these emergencies that you're dealing with now, you'll put this on the list of the important projects you need to look at. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jamison, please.
Hello, I'm back. If I've understood this right, I have 2 points to make. One is that a lot of us have been hanging in there waiting to hear about desalination, and we've not done that tonight in terms of longer term solving our problems. What we've heard about is why short-term desalination in this crisis is really not terribly significant. As best I can tell, that might give us 16 to 24% of our annual water requirements at past levels of consumption. In August or early September, one of the slides that was presented showed the water transfers on the pipeline would provide 13.5 million gallons a day. Tonight, I'm stunned to learn that it'd only be 8 million gallons a day because there's a bottleneck in East Bay Mud, I guess. So the key questions there are, what would it take in terms of millions of dollars to bust that bottleneck, and how long would it take? 8 million gallons a day from this pipeline is a big disappointment compared to what we'd heard before. Before, the pipeline at 13.5 million gallons would have provided 58% of our needs, roughly. Tonight, I'm hearing that it's only going to provide about 31% of our needs. That is a big difference and a big disappointment. So back to the big picture, what will it cost to break the bottleneck in East Bay Mud, and how long would that take us? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Adler?
Yes, thank you. I only got 3 minutes. I just don't know where to begin. This is such an awful idea there, because you can spend 60 with cost overruns, maybe $100 million to build this temporary pipeline, but there's not going to be any water at the end of the pipeline. This is not there. If we have a drought here, they have a worse drought in the Central Valley. There's millions of people and thousands of farmers who've been waging water wars over this water for the last 100 years, It's all adjudicated, and there's not going to be any water available if we need it. And so this is not a pipeline to bring water here. It's a pipeline. It's a drain pipe to drain away our money, energy, attention, resources that could be much better spent on building permanent facilities here in Marin, desal, fog catching, purification, any number of permanent things that $60 million could be spent on. Whereas if you read the memorandum of understanding with the East Bay Mud, they can at any time claim they need the water and that we're last on the list. And any one of these, we have to deal with dozens and dozens of agencies and water districts and federal, state, any one of them can say, you don't get the water, you're last on the list. So there's not going to be any water available from this pipeline. It's the biggest mistake what Marin Water could make. I guess I'm out of time.
Okay. Mr. Gertridge, please. Kyle Gertridge.
Yeah. Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Yeah, first, thanks to the board and staff for continuing to engage with the public on these issues and taking these comments to heart. Certainly doesn't seem easy to do. And I'm a relatively new Marin resident, but I've been paying close attention to the water shortage and intertie issue especially. And one aspect really kind of sticks out that I think we've heard hinted at a few times here, and that's that treating the intertie like it's the only option when it feels like too many, more akin to something of a Hail Mary, given that it's seems to be the most complicated, costly, risky option with the most third-party dependencies. Yet if you pay attention to these meetings, at least it seems to be more or less the sole focus of the district. And that, I think, is a disconnect that a lot in the public, even people who do pay attention to the meetings and to coverage on these issues, have a lot of trouble making sense of. I mean, a couple examples from this meeting alone. We saw a slide from a social post explaining why reservoir dredging is too complex, slow, and difficult and costly. But we're talking about putting more or less all our eggs in this intertie basket, which is plagued by all of those same issues, maybe at a higher degree and with a bunch of other issues tagging along. And I think, Paul, thank you so much for the more detailed update tonight. I think it's certainly appreciated and needed, and we need more details, some have noted. But stating like explicitly that we're going to rush through it, I think is pretty emblematic of the issue. Seems like there couldn't be anything more important than getting the details out there on these options. And then to echo Mr. Archer's comments on getting all the numbers for these projects out on the table and having them thoroughly analyzed and considered, I think is critical here. And Director Kohler echoed these sentiments as well. I hope we already have all of those and have already done the analysis, and that's how we're arriving at these decisions. But I think that the public needs to see that happening in action. So in the face of that, it seems like, oh, sorry, Terry, can you hold that up again a little bit closer to the screen? Thanks. It seems like a combination of increasing supply from Sonoma and also increasing conservation efforts are a simpler, more elegant and reliable, cheaper, probably more rapid solution, assuming we can get them to the table and actually deal with us to secure some of these water supply issues. And I'd love to hear more about why that's not progressing as fast as maybe someone hoped. Director Russell suggested in the last meeting on this topic that this was, he was unenthusiastic about the prospects there. Like, what are the issues there? What have the meetings look like? Considering the budget that we're talking about for this pipeline, how do we not entice them into dealing and taking care of those uncertain allocations and schedule issues with dollars? And yeah, I think I would just, again, echo getting a fuller picture on some of the supply side issues of the intertie project is pretty key here too.
Okay, thank you.
Gaining public trust and also just solving the problem at hand. So looking forward to that detail. Thank you.
Mr. Roger Roberts, then Baron Hamill. Mr. Roberts. Go ahead, sir.
Roger, you're muted.
No comment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Baron Hamel, please.
Thank you again for all your hard work. It's been amazing what I've been hearing tonight. In Mr. Sellier's presentation, the list of water conservation measures is pretty extensive. So here's an additional topic for future consideration for water conservation management. It's somewhat outside the box thinking, but one with a proven track record. It doesn't require large construction, low or no maintenance is needed. It has 10-year usage for single investment, and Los Angeles Reservoir has experience with this and is an example of a successful case study, and that is to put shade balls in reservoirs. It reduces evaporation by 80 to 90%, and their treatment facility uses less chlorine for algae growth. This is something for future consideration, and I'll include links to articles about this in my Drop in the Bucket newsletter later this week. Something to think about. It's outside the box thinking. I know that nothing is off the table when we're in these circumstances. Thank you again.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Great. Thanks everybody for your engagement on that. We're going to move forward now with item 9, which is authorizing the general manager to enter into the MOU with East Bay Mud on the emergency intertie. And you're stuck with me again. And so I will speak as quickly as I can without rushing, but hopefully we'll get the points across. So we are looking at a memorandum with East Bay Mud. We're going to talk a little, just very quickly, purpose of the MOU, key elements of the MOU, hit points of collaboration with East Bay Mud that we're working on, and look at options and next steps. The purpose of our MOU really, the intent is to capture the framework for how we're going to work together in the context of supporting MMWD through the drought. It also is a vehicle to allow reimbursement for East Bay Mud and recognizing that they're going to have significant costs as they go through the analysis and planning for this. And it also will serve as a framework for us going forward to our subsequent wheeling agreement. Key elements then, as you can imagine, there's a number of studies that East Bay Mud will be doing in terms of planning to understand, we already talked a little bit about pressure impacts to the distribution system. There's engineering that they're going to need to be doing. There are regulatory issues that they'll need to be checking on, whether they can store water for us in their local reservoirs. And then operational analysis, to what extent will Freeport intake be available for us or won't it? And how will they move that water through their system to us? We need to coordinate with East Bay Mud and water transfers. You were asking a little bit about pricing information. We don't want to be out there and outbidding East Bay Mud and driving up the cost of water unnecessarily. So coordination of water transfer efforts with East Bay Mud and Contra Costa. Similarly, cooperative behavior, if you like, will be needed for us to get through the environmental documentation. And we have to develop a wheeling agreement. And what does that mean? Well, how much does it cost East Bay Mud to move a gallon of water through their system? They need to figure that out. That's not a trivial thing for them to do. How much does it cost to store the water in a local reservoir, and so on? And then we do need to understand what these costs are. In terms of capacity, we talked a little bit about the 8 MGD, and with reference to the 13.5 MGD, yes, that was on the slide, and it's considered a peak flow for the design of this equipment. 8 MGD right now would be very, very welcome come next June, and with continued cooperation from our customers and perhaps a little bit of rainfall, we may be there. But right now, this is an East Bay Mud firm commitment through their distribution system. And they're very conservative. So there is a possibility that if pressure conditions locally in Richmond allow, then increased flow may be possible at that time as well. And with Freeport capacity,
they're in a situation where they're going to want to be importing water as well, and they don't want us to develop, and we don't either, plans that only rely on East Bay mud as an intake. And from the very beginning, we've always said that if Freeport wasn't available, then Contra Costa intake would be available. And so we're not solely reliant, and we take East Bay Mud's recommendation to look at Los Vaqueros very seriously. And as we look at it, we find that it does provide a great deal of flexibility for us to receive our transfer water and multiple ways of getting that water once it's in Los Vaqueros to Marin, either through exchange or wheeling. And I could go into the details here, but I don't think it's necessary. In terms of the next steps, we're going to work with East Bay Mud to keep this project moving forward. And we're, use that MOU experience to develop the specific agreement with East Bay Mud. And we're going to be bringing specific updates to the board. So tonight, staff is asking the board to authorize the general manager to finalize and execute the MOU with East Bay Mud, and to authorize, if necessary, the reimbursement for East Bay Mud up to $500,000.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So it is getting late. I do want to hear board comments. This really is a continuation of the conversation we just had. I am going to ask members of the public if you do want to speak on this. Of course, we want to hear from you. We're going to limit time to 2 minutes, given that we've already had a lot of discussion on this. But I want to start with board comments.
I have a question, actually. Paul, in the requirement, the wheeling agreement is required to be in place by December 31st. Is that realistic? And in order to create the wheeling agreement, do we have to have identified the source of the water before we can make the agreement?
I think the 31st it is doable. I think that's an East Bay Mud date. And as I mentioned, they are very conservative when they select dates. I'm not saying we don't exert any pressure in that regard, but we would, of course, take the wheeling agreement next month if we could. But right. So I do think the end of the year is a reasonable time frame for the agreement. In terms of which source, I think we can plan for multiple sources within the wheeling agreement.
I see.
And what we see in Contra Costa is sort of a menu, depending on the source and where it's taken in and how it's conveyed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Other board comments on this item? Okay, Terry, how are we doing on public? Oh, I'm sorry, Larry, did you have something?
You're on mute, sir.
Oh, Larry, you're muted. Larry Bragman, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Paul, just back of the envelope calculation, 8 million gallons a day it is about 25 acre feet a day, which is about 9,000 a year.
Correct.
So assuming, at that minimum level, we get 9,000 from them. What's the anticipated supply from Sonoma in 2022? Do you have any estimate?
It's hard to say right now, but we're planning on 4 million gallons a day.
Okay, so that would be another, let's call it 5,000 acre feet.
Yeah.
A little less.
A little bit,
So
yeah.
That means we've got to come up with local supply of about 5,000 acre feet.
Which
right.
is, oh, okay.
Is that doable? I think if we put all these various supply options together, we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
So, I think that's an important thing for folks to kind of understand. We're looking at putting together a package of supply options here.
Right.
They can't be predicted with complete certitude, but it seems to me, just doing sort of ballpark estimates, we can put together a sustainable package of supply with the current plan, if everything works with East Bay Mud. Is that a fair statement of our supply picture?
I agree entirely. Yeah, I think that is a good picture.
And I wanted to just be clear, and Paul talked about it, the 8 MGD was derived from very conservative modeling from East Bay Mud. So it really is a floor of when this is operational, what they'd be able to deliver us with no impact to the customers. And then once we put pressure sensors around the system and they make modifications, there's definitely opportunity to increase it, as there is, if we think about it, there's more capacity during the winter. We're going to be taking water all through the winter, next winter as well. So there'll be increased capacity. And then we do plan to engage East Bay Mud, for example, maybe off hours when demand's lower there, we can take more. So we have a number of strategies looking at 8 as a floor with the expectation that we'll be able to bump that up. But, you know, for conservative modeling to identify 8, when I saw that, I looked at that rather favorably because I am seeing and do understand the conservatism they're looking at in their modeling out of the gate.
Okay, and then another issue that Mr. Adler brought up about East Bay Mud, you know, sort of cinching supply. I mean, I think, isn't it true there's a distinction between our potential relationship with them versus our relationship with Sonoma, which is sort of a primary supplier? Isn't that a fair statement? In other words, our relationship with East Bay Mud is more of as a transferer of water that is acquired by the district and not as a supplier per se. Isn't that sort of a distinction between that relationship and Sonoma?
Yes, it does depend in the end what our form our agreement takes with East Bay Mud. You know, we did talk if they act as our agent in the transfer market, which would benefit us substantially in terms of you know, environmental and regulatory approvals. So that you know, that agreement, we haven't got the details of that agreement, but in that case maybe it's a little closer to Sonoma. But the practical matter is that East Bay Mud is a sister water agency, and of course, while they're a competitor in the market, they're also sympathetic to our needs, and you know, the history is more one of collaboration, I think.
Yeah, and it's essential that we enter into some kind of an agreement to collaborate and cooperate with our regional partners. I mean, it just, this MOU is just an essential component, I think, of moving forward. So,
right. And I would say, just to make the point, I mean, regional cooperation is in our DNA. It's who we are. It's what we do. This is not our first rodeo. I mean, we have, you know, a long and very deep and rich history of regional cooperation. So while this might be a new phase of it with East Bay Mud, it's certainly not our first, you know, our first engagement with them. So.
Understood. And I just think, you know, not to put a fine point on it, I think climate change really changes the calculus of our planning.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're looking at now.
Isn't the analogy East Bay Mud with North Marin water? I think we have wheeling agreements with North Marin, don't we? Of
course. Yes, we do.
And we get the Sonoma water through those wheeling agreements. So that's more the role, I think. I mean, Paul, correct me if I'm saying something wrong here, but I think that's the analogy, not Sonoma water.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the distinction I was trying to draw, Jack. So that's a good clarification.
And Ben, as I recall, didn't we bring 10 MGD across the bridge in the 76, 77 drought?
It's
a number I remember.
Sure, it's probably in the ballpark. There was some discussion of the. I'll just leave it at that. I think it was a similar quantity. Times have changed. You know, East Bay Mud system has probably been modified a little bit in all of this, but I would just leave it with 8 is the floor. And it's, from my view, a pretty good position to be in terms of their commitment of what they can supply in a very conservative initial look.
I agree with that. And of course, the other factor is that Chevron's now taking 4 MGD less every day than they were at that time.
Right.
I think an enormous amount has changed since the 70s. I mean, Freeport didn't exist. I mean, we can go on, and I don't want to take time tonight to do that. But I mean, I think the worst thing we could do is act as though nothing's changed in the last 40 years, almost 50 years. So, we're in a very, I think the region is a different place. I mean, I think, right.
Toilets are different.
Right. I think, I mean, for me, I have reservations about the bridge intertie for a lot of reasons, but what has made me feel that it is reasonable to proceed with this next step, which is, still well short of a commitment, is that what it really does for us is well beyond this drought. This is about building resilience for the longer term by connecting us with the vast system of water utilities in the East Bay and beyond. Yeah. And, we haven't, as a water district, felt the need to go there before. But in light of climate change, building in that additional layer of resilience, seems to me to be the time for us to at least be taking this hard look at it.
Yeah, except the time when we had to go there in 76 and 77.
Again, it was a long time ago. The situation was different. It's today.
Not that
and
different.
Today is what we need to be thinking about, is my point.
It opens up options. That's the point.
It does.
Yeah. It builds that additional resilience. I mean, we're dealing with an entirely different climate situation. So if there aren't any more board comments, it's already 10. We've got a bunch of other items. I'm very comfortable with my going to public comment. Monty, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say, I agree with your statement, Cynthia, about this isn't a commitment to the project, but it is what we have to do to explore this option. And this is right now a central option. And we will learn things from this that could have long-term value as well toward our water supply reliability. So I agree, we just need to move forward.
Okay, Terry, do we have? Thank you. Thanks everybody for that. And Paul, I'm sorry, if I haven't already, thank you for the presentation, which was crisp and clear and helpful. Terry, do we have public comment on this item?
Yeah, we have 3. The first one's Roger Roberts. Go ahead, sir.
I'd be interested in seeing what the cost of the water is going to be, including the wheeling agreements and the cost of the pumping and so on. And I assume that once you have those in place, we'll get that information. And I also assume that that's not part of the $90 million for the capital project itself. But if some portion of that bond is to pay for some of those costs, you need to break those out. But we don't really see what the operating cost is going to be and whether that's going to have a rate impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, do you want to address that briefly? I think that really went to the question that I raised earlier, but Roger has always asked it better than I did. Yeah, and he raises a good point. We need to finalize those agreements for the supply of the water before we can, really start assessing the exact costs per unit. You take water in at Freeport versus taking in at the Contra Costa Delta intake and putting it in Los Vaqueros. There's different, if it's different, one transfer supplier may have a different price than another for a variety of reasons. And just to note, we're seeing, prices somewhere from $400 to as high as $1,200, right, depending on the source that we're talking to.
And to be clear, Paul, those costs are the purchase of water added on ultimately to the cost of water is the cost of wheeling, storage, and treatment as well.
Correct. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Roger, it's a very high probability it will exceed our current cost of water.
Oh, yeah.
That's almost guaranteed.
Yeah. Do we have another?
Yeah, there are 2 more, Ed Jameson and Rick Adler, please, in that order. Mr. Jameson?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. The tenor of the last few minutes discussion has me a little concerned. There seems to be an assumption that there will continue to be an availability of Sonoma water, at least in the ballpark of what we've been drawing. They're going to have the same drought conditions we are, and I'm really concerned that any assumption about continued availability of their water to give to us may be unreliable. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Mr. Adler?
Yes, thank you. I would like to point out that the memorandum of understanding says that we will not compete with the East Bay Mud for any water that they're looking at. So they get first choice. After they've gotten all the water they want, then maybe we can get some water. It also says that we will hold them harmless for any problems that arise legally, which means this was a lawyer's opportunity here. We will be responsible for anything that goes wrong in any of this. We have to pay to protect them. And again, I would suggest if you want to pursue the memorandum of understanding and get better terms, okay, but don't spend any money on pipes or tanks or anything like that, because there's not going to be any water there. If we're so desperate to do this pipeline for water, then the Central Valley is going to be even more desperate. And so they're going to have all the water tied up. They've had it for 100 years, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No further speakers.
All right, I'm going to bring this back to the board, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the proposal.
Motion to approve it.
Second.
Okay, looking for a roll call, Terry.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, we are up to item 10. This is a second amendment to an agreement for engineering design services and support of the Intertide project. Once again, we will obviously have public comment on this item. I'm going to request that the public limit themselves to 2 minutes. And if you can avoid repeating what you've already said, I think we would all appreciate it.
Thank you. Paul Cillia, Operations Director. Again, you've stuck with me third time, but the good news is that we're getting to the end. So everybody stick with it. We're getting there. It's only 10 o'clock. Come on. I mean, somewhere it's 7 o'clock, right? I don't want to make light. This is an important decision for us. We're continuing to pursue the emergency intertie project and keep that as an available option for us. We've talked a little bit earlier in some of the questions about WSP's role. They've helped us through the feasibility study in selecting an alternative. Their experience on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge has been invaluable. I really don't think there would be another structural firm capable to respond in the time that they have done. So they've been engaged early on, and just for the record, we didn't only look at 2 options. We're not that smart. There were 5 at least options that were looked at under the lower deck of the bridge, which we talked about earlier on, and that was discarded because, you know, if we start changing the clearance of the bridge from the surface of the bay, then we get Coast Guard involved, and that's a really lengthy process. So it just wouldn't work with our schedule. We did look at putting it in the traffic, the temporary traffic lane on the lower deck. Again, right, we start impacting users on the bridge in Caltrans. We looked at overhanging it off the side of the lower deck, and structurally that was not going to work. So that we narrowed that down to the 2 options, and we've talked about the selected option under the upper deck, and it enjoys the major stakeholder support, and it can be done in the time frame that we need it to be done. So with the feasibility established, WSP are prepared to complete the design at the board's pleasure, of course. And the item tonight is asking the board to approve the second amendment with WSP and authorizing the general manager to finalize and execute that agreement, not to exceed $1,250,166.91, which includes the 20% contingency
of $208,361.15.
So Paul, the timing for the decision tonight is linked to the critical path, tell me if I'm correct, of the project. We aren't asking to complete the design just to have it ready. It's part of the schedule of the overall project to ensure we're prepared if the board does decide to move forward with this project, that it can be done in the time frame we'll need it.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
So to be clear, even though this is a significant investment, basically $1.2 million, this is still not the go decision. This is getting us prepared to have the information we need to make a go decision. And we certainly have the option of not doing that. I mean, it's an investment, but it is not a decision that we can't, where we can't, I'm sorry, I'm just tired. We're not going forward with this doesn't mean that we can't go in another direction if it appears after more work and more study and more data is developed that this is not the right way to go. I just want to be sure that we're all on the same page about that.
Yeah, it's not an approval of the project.
Exactly.
That's correct. And if I could, it may not feel like too much value if we don't proceed, but having a completed design of a project that's sitting on the shelf, often 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if we, for some reason, weren't going to proceed now, that design packet does have value for the future.
Sure.
Potentially.
Okay, board comment on this item?
Yes. Thank you, Paul, for clarifying the not to exceed. I didn't think the language in the proposal was very strong in that area. They said they won't go past the number without written approval, but they do have a 20% contingency in there. So am I to understand it's basically a time and materials project? That's how they're going to bill us?
They've suggested budgets for tasks, but they want to reserve the right if a particular task within the budget was to, get lopsided, more effort required than they thought, and they had extra budget in another task, they want to be able to move money around that way.
No, that's fine, but I think that's not the point of the billing. I think it's essential that this be billed on a time and materials basis.
Yeah, Paul, isn't this like all professional services?
Yeah.
We're entering into an agreement that is, Director Russell, based on the hours expended by the consultant. It's not some lump sum design agreement. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, they're going to bill us as they work through the hours.
Yeah, that's fine. That needs to be clarified in the contract because it's not in the proposal. And the next question is, the thing that I thought was lacking in the proposal was there was no schedule of deliverables. And I think that needs to be fixed. I think they need to commit to the best of their ability to certain dates for when this stuff will be available.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a draft scope at this time.
Sure.
So we do have their schedule and we can include that in there.
Yeah, and I thought it was a pretty good job on everybody's part here to pull this together. I appreciated the detail in the spreadsheet. It was very helpful. And I think that, they're clearly showing their professionalism.
Okay, other board comment on this item before we turn to public comment?
Is there going to be any actual metallurgical examination of the bridge structures? The contract talks about calculations and stresses and weights, but it seems to me with a structure that old, we need to be taking an actual look at the metal, the condition of the metal that we're going to be attaching to.
Yeah.
Remember, Larry, that it was substantially upgraded about 10 years ago. They did a $500 million, I think it was almost $700 million in earthquake retrofit on the bridge. Just keep that in the back of your head.
Yeah, and
I was just going to add
that's somewhat reassuring, but I'm just saying I don't know where what components this is going to be attached to, whether it's going to be attached to the upgraded or existing. So, I mean, I assume at some point somebody's going to take an actual metallurgical look at the status of the bridge that we're.
Yeah, they Caltrans inspect the bridges pretty rigorously, a couple times each year. I forget the frequency right now, and they do a member by member inspection. It's not a casual sort of walkthrough. So they know the condition of the beams that we'll be attaching to in sort of intimate detail. And the structural engineers, when they need to understand the degree of corrosion, what sort of material has been removed from the, each member. So I'm confident that their calculations are based on field observations and sort of known quantities that way.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Paul.
You're on mute.
Apologies. Any further board comment on this item before we go to public comment? Okay, Terry, how many public comments do we have?
We have 2, Roger Roberts and Rick Adler. Mr.
Great.
Roberts?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
When they finish this final design work, will there be attached to that a specific cost figure so that we know what the actual construction cost will be or not?
Ben, do you have that?
The actual, like any construction project, are typically the design engineer with final design gives you an estimate, and we certainly will have that. The actual costs come when the contractors bid, and we're working with Caltrans on how that's going to happen. Is it informal bids or what? But we'll have some process following design where the bids come in, and that's where we actually have the hard price. But we'll have a very good estimate following the final design. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Adler?
Yes, thank you. I would like to suggest that you put the same amount of energy and time and attention into really researching and developing plans for desal, especially desal not through the reverse osmosis, but through the evaporation, and that you do the same amount of energy, time into researching the fog catching. You said that a gallon per day per square foot, if you have a 50 foot long, 10 foot high screen, that's 50 gallons a day. If you'd have 1,500 of those per mile, it's a lot of gallons. And you could have several miles of those catching water. Anyway, what I suggest, don't spend any money on pipes or tanks, and don't float the bonds, but put your time and energy into really researching and producing a similar discovery about desalination and fog catching. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one more speaker, Miss Mimi Willard, please.
Yes, I have a short question, which is, at what point is there going to be an analysis of the cost of laying the pipeline on top of the upper deck versus suspending it from the upper deck? It seems that the cost differential should be taken into account along with and as compared with whatever disruption happens to, whether it's multi-use traffic on the upper deck or whether it is construction issues on the lower deck while you're trying to suspend the pipeline off of the upper deck. And that is something that the board and the public should be aware of before any decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers.
I'm sorry, Terry, did you say there were more comments?
There are no more.
Okay, then I'm looking for a motion.
Move approval.
Second,
Director Bregman,
aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, everybody, thanks for hanging in there. We're just about there. We're now moving on to item 11. This is a request to fill a mechanical and electrical supervisor position.
Yeah, good evening, directors. Darren Machado, Acting Operations Director. This is a request to fill a mechanical and electrical supervisor position in the Operations Division. The position of mechanical and electrical supervisor will become vacant in December due to a retirement. This position currently supervises 8 employees who are responsible for electrical and mechanical maintenance at the district's water treatment plants, pump stations, storage tanks, automated valve stations, reservoirs, and they also take care of HVA systems at the district facilities. Staff is requesting authorization for the general manager to recruit and hire 1 permanent mechanical and electrical supervisor and any other subsequent positions that may become vacant as a result of this recruitment.
Okay, board comment on this item?
Why don't we just go ahead and do both of these together?
They're in different, well, Molly, what do you think about that? I don't know that it matters.
I think that if there's not an objection from the board, that can happen.
Okay, who's got
I
the
don't
other?
know who has the presentation?
Darren has it.
I have that as well.
Oh,
Okay.
me. Okay.
Good. Yeah, this position is also going to be vacant due to retirement at the end of November. This position investigates and performs skilled work in a variety of water system problems. This position acts as a first responder to water emergencies, including water main breaks, hit hydrants, and emergency turnoffs for consumer leaks. This position also performs leak detection, maintains valves, performs water main shutdowns for both emergency and planned work, and makes system changes. Staff is requesting authorization for the general manager to recruit and hire 1 permanent utility system specialist and any other subsequent positions that may become vacant as a result of this recruitment.
Okay, thanks. Any board comment on either of these positions?
We're not increasing full-time employees, correct?
Correct.
They're both essential positions for the operation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I would move approval on both items.
Second.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item, Terry?
Valerie Erickson. Miss Erickson?
Hi, I'm hearing pipeline. I'm still not hearing anything about desalination plants. And if the
Ms.
pipeline was,
Erickson, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is a completely different item. We're just voting now to replace 2 people in the operations division. So we had a long conversation about desal.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask staff to catch up with you offline. I don't mean to be cutting you off, but I need to keep the agenda items on what the agenda items are about.
There are no further speakers or public comments.
Okay, then we need a roll call.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. Can I just ask staff, can somebody please catch up with Ms. Erickson? I'm just concerned that the Zoom thing wasn't working for her, and I want to make sure we are connecting with her about her concerns about pipeline versus desal. So I don't know, Emma, if that's somebody on your team on comms that can reach out, but given her concerns and that she wasn't able to make her comments at the right time, I just want to make sure that we do reach out to her and that we're able to connect with her.
Sure, can do that.
Thanks. Okay, our last item is future agenda items.
Okay, that's me. Your next meeting is actually a board retreat on October 15th. I don't know if Ben wants to mention anything about that. And then after that, we'll go on to, after the board retreat, the following week, we'll have our regular board meeting. Then our operations committee meeting will be October 26th, and our finance and administration committee meeting will be October 28th.
I think briefly, I just wanted to remind the board that notwithstanding the resolution you passed tonight, this is a retreat. So we are looking at doing that in person. We've secured a location that's very spacious. So let me know if for some reason that may not work with you. I'll talk more about it. Vaccinations are required and we're going to follow all safety protocols. So if you're up to it and I can just engage with you outside of this, if there's any concerns, if you'd let me know, that'd be super.
I have nothing else to add.
Okay. It sounds like we have finally run out of things to talk about. So good night, everybody, and we'll do it all again soon.
Okay, thanks a
Okay.
lot, everybody.
Night all.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.